I'm Burton and I am the creative lead here at Alton Towers Resort, working for Merlin Magic Making. And my job is to design rides, attractions, hotels, restaurants and shows to drive a visitation to our theme parks. My background is I studied architecture at university and I have a huge passion for the themed entertainment industry. So building roller coasters, telling stories, that's all the things I'm really interested in. The principles of architecture and the skill sets that you learn are pretty much exactly the same that we have to utilise when designing an attraction, right from the brief all the way through to the completion. Whilst we might be building a roller coaster here, which is very different to normal buildings, it's still the same. It's the transport device of which we're putting people onto it and building buildings and design around it to tell a story that's more explicit than you would normally do with, say, a housing development. So the process of building a roller coaster is very similar to any other built environment project. We follow a similar framework to help us get from right through the design process all the way through to the final completion. And the first part of that is the brief, and that's something that we get from the marketing teams at the park where they tell us what they're looking for. So for instance, like Wicker, they told us they wanted an attraction to attract 16 to 24-year-olds, and it is my job then to go away and create something that's compelling. And we look at lots of insights, so we travel around the world looking at other roller coasters and other products out there with manufacturers to see what we could utilise here at the park and something that we don't have in our portfolio. We also look at insights from our guests and how they might use attractions and how we could think of new ways of doing that, and that way that will influence the design when we come to actually building the attraction. When we normally build a roller coaster like this, we could be spending anywhere between 16 and 18 million pounds over 4 years. And when we've created that attraction, we need to make sure it's compelling and exciting that makes guests want to come to the park and keep going on it. And therefore it's commercially viable for us to keep building attractions like this. We knew we wanted to have a wooden roller coaster here to add to our portfolio of attractions, but the thing that we wanted to really set it apart to make it world class is adding an element that was really surprising and thrilling, and here we added fire. And the combination of wood and fire, of course, is quite an exciting prospect. They don't generally go well together, especially with a roller coaster. And that's where we then looked at stories and different ideas that then led us to the idea of the Wicker, a roller coaster built around fire and wood and a story about this giant effigy that you're being kind of fed to the flames as the guests. So the next stage of the project is we go out there and get surveyors to survey the land and the topography and the ground conditions of an attraction. Because of course, when you're building such an attraction like a roller coaster, you need to have good foundations for the ride because it's going to have a lot of structural loadings and movement within it as well. At Alton Towers in the South Staffordshire Moorlands, we're not allowed to build above the tree line, which is something that's quite a challenge for us to work with. So therefore, something like Wicker, we use the topology of the landscape to actually build the ride so that we were able to build it on the slope to use that so the gravity of the ride can make it round a long course of the track. So what you'll notice is it's a lot higher at the top than it is at the bottom. And then the other thing, it means that as well, we're reducing the cost because we're using less supports and stanchions when at the top compared to if you're building this on a flat surface. So we've actually turned the challenge around and made it a benefit for us. We have to go through the planning process very similar to everyone else does with big developments. Obviously, something like a roller coaster is a bit different in terms of the noise. We're going to have lots of guests who are screaming all the time, so there's a lot more noise reports that we normally have to do. And also, we're usually building roller coasters in areas that have never been built on before. So there's the same considerations we have to have in terms of nature and health and safety. Everything, you name it, we have to look into it beforehand. So when we get into the technical design phase, we would normally use BIM modelling to model the entire attraction, right from the buildings, the maintenance bays for the ride vehicles, the queue lines, but even the attraction itself. So we would create simulations of the rides. There's a video format that calculates things like the stress loadings on the structures, the motion of the G-forces that are going around and the speeds to ensure that it's safe for all our guests to go on and that we're developing a design that won't break apart going forward. Material selection is really important, especially for a theme park. Our attractions minimum have to be here for at least 10 years, so they need to have a lifespan to last quite a long time and be robust, because we've got, like in a queue line, thousands of guests and millions of guests each year going through there, and we need to make sure that with guest interaction that that's not going to break or fall apart. And the other point we need to make sure is we're telling the story still. So for instance, with Wicker, we know that fire and wood doesn't exactly go well together, but the big creature that we've created behind me here actually made of concrete, but we've used a simulated effect on it to create the idea of wood, and therefore we know that the concrete and the fire can go together, but it's telling the story and still looks like that wood. So the last stage is building and then testing the attraction. So we go through many years of building the ride from the ground up, and then we go into the testing phase. In the testing phase, we have to spend a minimum of 200 hours cycling a roller coaster before anyone is ever allowed on it, with water dummies, doing weight tests on the structure, and every bolt has to be re-inspected as you go along the track. And then, of course, that's my favourite part, because when we are ready and fully tested, I'll be one of the first people on the ride to test it, which is a big perk of my job. I love my job. I think my job's great. It's so much fun. Every day is different. One day you could be sitting in meetings, working with contractors. Another day you could be there drawing out new ideas. Another day you could be art directing lights and show within an attraction. So no 2 days are ever the same, which I find really exciting. And of course, you get to ride the rides at the end of it as well.